Are you thankful for the country that you live in, or do you have more complaints than thanks? Let's talk about it. I don't mean like assets, I mean value. The value of a female life is valued half the value of a man's life. Hello everyone, and welcome to another one of my videos. Today I wanted to take a little bit of a different spin from the type of concepts I've been talking about in the past videos. And as you could tell from the intro, that is because I wanted to talk a little bit about how thankful we are. Now, I know that sounds a little cliche and maybe even out of season, but just track with me here because it's for a reason. Just breaking it down very quick and simple, I wanted to discuss the concept of how thankful we are for the country that we live in. And the reason I wanted to discuss this is because it's become very apparent, and it's been apparent for a while, how unthankful people are or have become or have been for a while of the country they live in, right? Now, granted, I've said this multiple times and I'll continue to say it. No president is perfect. The nation is not perfect. No person is perfect. And therefore, if a president is a person, if a government is run by people who are not perfect, if a government is voted in by people who are not perfect, then it's very highly likely that there's going to be some manner, shape, or form where the function of the government, or rather the progression of the government, where it's moving towards, how it's moving, is going to be found unpleasing to you. With that being said, that tends to invite some complaints that we have about our government. That may bring some thoughts of dislikes that we have about our nation. But the reason I wanted to focus here on what I'm talking about is because regardless of how many faults or complaints may be present or we may have with our nation, with our government, we should never find ourselves to where we have more complaints than thanks. And again, I know that sounds cliche, but the reason I'm saying this is because of the old saying that people know very well: you don't know what you have until you lose it. We as people who are living here need to take time to acknowledge the great country that we live in. And the reason I say that is because, to get more in details of what I was talking about previously, is you can look and see on social media, you can look and see when you interact with people, that there are certain people where, because of the stance that they find themselves in politically, they have come to a point to where it's not just that they disagree with the current movement of the government, they literally hate America. And I don't understand that. It's very sad to see that expressed, but some people literally have a hatred towards our government. So much so, and we're not talking about hatred towards presidents, right? We're going beyond that, because you've had that for years, even with assassinations, right? That's more so getting into that. I'm more so speaking on the concept that people are so in opposition with the government because of how it's going that they want to move away. They want to exile themselves or leave. They want to start inviting other people's cultures in to replace ours because they don't feel like ours is what's best. And you have such a removal of a backbone of what is in America, to where people are willing to accept everything else. People are willing to go and run to everything else except for what we have here. And the reason I'm bringing this out is because, first, we have to acknowledge the great country that we live in. And again, I know nothing is going to ever be perfect, but to sit here and act like what we live in is not a great country, if not the greatest country, then we're almost deceiving ourselves, right? Because regardless of what stance you take, regardless of what complaints you may have of not liking this or not liking that, the record still stands that as we've seen all this commotion going on with ICE and so forth, why are immigrants still trying to come to America? Because it's better, right? Why do we have such freedom that we do? America, and people don't realize this, the freedom that we have as far as talking, the freedom of speech, right? People sometimes take that for granted, and they don't realize you go into certain other nations, and I've talked about this with a few of my friends in close conversation, how I'm not gonna depict every single country, but you start talking about other countries, like, for example, the Philippines. I did some research on them and discovered that if you were a resident of the Philippines and you talked ill against the government, you could be persecuted just for talking bad about the government. If you were a visitor, just visiting, so not a citizen of the Philippines, but visiting, but still there, and you did the same thing, instead of getting persecuted in the legal sense, you get kicked out of the country and get blacklisted so that you can never return. And yet here we live in a country to where we have literally a constitutional protected right, an amendment that protects our freedom of speech. And you still have people who almost want to silence what you have to say. You have people who act as if, oh, we don't live in such a great country. I want to move here. I want to move to this place. You have complaints of people saying, oh, America is such a racist country, you know, when literally I'm not listening to him here now, but just because he has his own channel and, you know, crossing different platforms. But there was a YouTuber I watched once before where he was getting into political conversations, and he is of Black ethnicity, but he might be mixed with some others as well, just from hearing his conversation, but primarily he is of Black ethnicity. And that being said, he was upset of the complaints people have about America being racist, where he was saying, you have no idea what other countries are like. Wherever he was visiting, as it was a while ago, I watched the video, he expressed that he, as a tourist or visitor, whatever you want to call it, went to go eat at a restaurant, and he had a nice window seat where he had a nice view. But because of the color of his skin, he was approached by the workers of the establishment telling him that because he looks the way he does, they cannot have him sitting in the front window because everyone coming in would see him. And if people come into the restaurant seeing him, then it would be caused as a deterrent and make people want to leave or not come in. So they asked him to get up from where he was and go sit in the back of the restaurant. That still happens today. Not in America, but in other nations. But yet here we sit as a people that still act as if we have every right to complain, which you have rights to complain, but to the extent as if we are one of the worst countries ever, or we're just such a terrible place. And it's like we fail to acknowledge the great nation that we still live in. And this is why I say we need to begin to take time to be thankful for the country we live in, take time to thank God for the country we live in, and be appreciative of what we have. Because as I iterated before, what we don't appreciate now, right, when we lose it, we then become apparent or become aware of what we had, but only little too late, right? We're very familiar with this in relationships, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, or so forth, and even in other avenues. You don't know what you have until you lose it. And the reason I use that term or phrase is because, again, with these complaints, you have the great establishment of a country that we have, where we have the freedoms that we have the freedom of religion. We have, yes, the history that we have, but we also have the progression that we had, right? To where the Blacks, including myself, you know, I'm part of that community myself, where Blacks have the advancement that we have, to where we have the rights that we have, right? We have the assistance and the aids that we have, federal aid, whatever, financial aid, so forth. We have these programs to help grow the Black community and rather enrich and grow further the Black community. So you have a nation that now supports its minorities, right? Instead of downing the minorities or putting them in the back of restaurants, what we have is a nation that supports and uplifts the minorities, right? You have a nation where, even though we come from a past where females were not in the same state of having rights that they are, not that they were necessarily downed of being looked at less or, you know, garbage, but they still didn't have the same rights, mainly primarily, yes, because they were stay-at-home mothers, you know, they didn't have jobs and so forth. And so there were a lot of layers that went into that, but still this point stands that women didn't have the right to vote and so forth. And yet we've had the progression to where now in today's age, not only can women work the same jobs, right? You can have women who are bosses get paid more than you. You have equal rights, right? You have movements like feminism, even though I'll go ahead and admit here, you have some people that take that to the toxic extreme to where they want to belittle men instead of just seeing equality. But that's a whole different story for another time. But the point is, you see even the progression with the female gender, right? You have it to where females can do what they couldn't before. You have it to where they can work what they couldn't before. And yet you have movements now to where you have with transgender ideology to where we got women to the point to where they could play sports and play in their own leagues and so forth, to where now if a man claims that he feels like a woman or wants to become a woman, now all of a sudden he can play in the woman's league, even though he's a biological male with the X and Y chromosome, which has been scientifically proven to have more strength because of the natural testosterone that the body forms without hormone changes or enhancers, right? And so now women in that sense get put at a disadvantage, right? To go even further, you have it to where women, again, have the freedom that they have to work and so forth, to be valued and so forth. Women don't have to be a stay-at-home mother. They can make their own career, make their own money, become CEOs and so forth. Yet I've seen quite the bit of people down, whether directly or indirectly, our nation and our values, so much so to where they try to welcome in other values ignorantly without knowing what they're welcoming in. And that is Sharia law. For those of you who don't know what that is a viewpoint that comes from not Muslim people, but specifically the Islamic faith, to where if you really studied and looked into what Sharia law values, how it lives, how it functions rather, then you would see that women are not in any way, shape, or form viewed as equals. They're viewed almost half as men. And I don't mean like assets, I mean value. The value of a female life is valued half the value of a man's life. You have certain circumstances to where, say, if a woman who was a mother had their kids misbehaving, but the kids were of the male gender, there are restrictions on how she can go about correcting, because even though she's the mother and is older and brought that life into being through the reproductive process, instead of being able to correct, she has restrictions even though he's younger because he's a man, or rather because he's a boy. And so you have systems like this to where you don't have to look hard to see the limitations, the restrictions, the bondage, if you even will, that can be imposed on females compared to our traditions, our customs, to what we have grown into becoming, to what we've blossomed in. And even though we have the great rights for females, you still have females themselves. It's not men trying to push this. You have females trying to welcome in Sharia law. And again, it's because, one, out of ignorance, you don't understand what you have. You don't understand what you're welcoming in, but also you don't value what you have. And this is why I stress this point. We have to come as a nation to a point to where we can be thankful for what we have. Too many times, you'll rarely ever see on the news where a good message is being presented. What's clickbait? What draws people's attention? It's always the bad, right? People always bring forth the negative, which is why people say, oh, I can't watch the news today, or I'm sick of watching the news. It's because of being sick of all the negativity coming in. You can't bear it. But with that same mindset, because of how much the news pushes of the bad and the bad and the bad, you have, as a person, you have to control your environment and control and discipline your own mindset to where if you don't come back to a state of being thankful for what you have, you'll be raised to such a point to where not only will you take for granted what you have, but you will hate what you have. And again, this is what can lead into females, if they're, I'll even say, brainwashed or manipulated mentally into thinking that something like Sharia law is better for their sake. That, again, comes out of manipulation and comes out of, at the root, or rather from a seed of hating what you already have. See, if you are thankful for what you have, it puts up a barrier to where even though you have complaints, you still have a sense of structure and strength to where, yeah, I don't like this, or this might not be the greatest, I might not appreciate it, but nevertheless, I'm okay. But if you can't even acknowledge the few things that are good, then what you're going to become is an inner terrorist, where from the inside, even though you are an American, you're going to become an anti-American and try to welcome in something that's foreign. And not that foreign in of itself is bad, but in these specific circumstances and circumstances of the light, where you welcome in something not realizing what you're bringing in is going to take us back and recede us back from where we progressed forward. So we have to take time, and you can look at any situation like this, but exercising is a great one, right? We all know it's hard to discipline ourselves to keep exercising and keep exercising and keep exercising, especially when you're starting off. This is why we have exercising goals, because as you progress and you accomplish your goal, you can acknowledge, hey, wait a second, I honestly didn't know if I could get this, or at least so fast, but look at where I've gotten to. And that gives you a sense of confidence, it gives you encouragement, and it's these checkpoints to where when you focus on them, it helps progress you, or rather projects you forward. And if you ever have a slip up, or you miss a day, skip a day, have a slip up in diet, you still have these checkpoints, whether it's a weight loss or a shape that you obtained. Even if you take a little step back, you acknowledge, wait a minute, I'm starting to lose this checkpoint. And it reinforces you, I better straighten things up. This is why it's important to find the things you're thankful for. Provides that strength, right? But again, getting to the other core concept that I mentioned briefly of being thankful so it doesn't cause you to hate your own nation. People don't realize how hateful they are to America and their own nation when they start spewing some of the things they say. What's concerning is people don't understand how detrimental it is as a nation for us to be this way. And to paint that picture, I wanted to cover a biblical concept just really quickly. But it's something that's not just only known biblically. We all know it. We've all heard it before. The common saying that a divided house cannot stand. It comes from the Bible. People outside the Bible use it. They acknowledge it. You look into team sports. If a team doesn't have unity, if there's no teamwork, what happens? The team falls apart. So you have to have a sense of unity. So with that being said, when it comes to our nation, if we can be brought to such a state to where instead of being thankful, we hate our nation, and then we are then finding ourselves in a state to where we're against our nation, then how is our nation going to continue to succeed? How is our nation going to continue to thrive if we're constantly fighting ourselves on the inside? So with that being said, I just wanted to bring these up, just two quick scriptures, okay? The first comes out of the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 25. And this is talking the scenario where Jesus was doing miracles. The Pharisees, who were the religious church people of the time, didn't acknowledge him as the Son of God. And when they seen and heard the stories and testimonies of him performing miracles, even to the point of casting out demons, because they were in such opposition to him being the Christ and the Messiah, they came up with the accusation, oh, well, he's casting out demons by the power of demons. This isn't the power of God. So Jesus, it says here, discerning what they were thinking, knowing what they were thinking, it says, now when Jesus realized what they were thinking, he said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is, guess what? Destroyed. And no town or house divided against itself will stand. So notice how it even includes a town. So it's not just a people. It's not kingdoms, it's everything. A town, a kingdom can be equated to a nation. So again, bringing it back to that point, if we are not unified as a nation, or rather, if we become more and more and more divisive as a nation than we do unified as a nation, how successful of a nation are we going to be? Now, if you want this point ironed out even further, let me pull up the second verse here. So this comes out of the same book, same chapter, but it's the right next verse. See, a lot of people, I'll bring it back up. A lot of people, to some extent, are familiar with this verse. But what's funny is if you read past this verse and go to the next verse, look at what this says. Jesus continues by saying, so if Satan casts out Satan, referring to the accusation they gave him, if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? So what point am I making here? Even Satan himself needs unity. And see, people don't understand this, especially when you start getting into biblical conversations or biblical theory. People almost naturally come with the assumption that unity is some kind of godly thing, when that's kind of right, but it's not always right. That's off the mark. Unity is not a godly concept. It's a strength concept. In other words, just because you are unified, just because you're expressing unity, does not mean you're being godly. It means you're strengthening what you have. So that being said, even Satan himself has to have unity. Otherwise, losing unity isn't losing godliness. Him losing unity is losing strength. And he, being in opposition to who God is and what God is doing, has to have strength. So even he cannot be divided against himself. And Jesus Christ himself says this. Satan cannot be against Satan. So if even Satan needs to have unity and cannot have division, why are we so okay as a nation with being as divided as we are? And while you can have such a deep conversation with that of how divisive we are, how bad it is, let's take it a step back to the shallow water and get to how we got to that point in the first place. When we live in this nation, are we thankful for the nation that we live in? Are we going to be found in a state to where we're so manipulated to where our minds get turned and twisted to where we hate the very nation that we call home? Because the more hateful you feel towards your nation, the more against it you're going to be and the more willing you will be to attack, whether that's physical attacks, whether that's indirect attacks, whether that's just providing opposition. Attacks can come in the form of lying, bringing forth lies or false accusations to say, oh, look at this or look at that, just to get things to bend to how you want it to bend. There's many different types of attacks that can happen, but regardless, and I'll go ahead and say this, if you are against your own nation, by that common, maybe not technical definition, but well-known accepted definition, if you are against your nation, you can be considered a terrorist. And so the way to progress America is not to turn against it, but to help push it in certain directions. And again, I'm not going to get off in too many tangents here, but I wanted to focus and hone in on this concept because I feel like as a nation, we need to begin to become more thankful, right? The more, and you can even take it this way if you want to. Even psychology has proven and shown through studies that the more thankful people are, guess what? The happier that they are, the more at peace that they are, right? The less depression they go through, right? It's because it brings good thoughts and brings, some people may word it this way, positivity instead of negativity. Well, why don't we do this in politics? Again, politics, I'm trying not to go into too many tangents here, but I'm trying to hone into this concept because I want everyone to hold on to this and I want everyone to unify with this. Thankfulness is a virtue, okay? We always hear about patience being a virtue, but thankfulness is a virtue, right? And we need, as a nation, to begin to acknowledge when something good is happening and also acknowledge past good things that have happened and value them as the good things that they are. Be thankful for them. If you want to take time throughout the day to just contemplate it, if you want to take time out the day to thank God for it, take that time to establish that value in your heart of thankfulness for what you have. Because again, if you don't find yourself thankful for what you have, don't be afraid if you lose it. That's all I have for this video. I thank everyone for tuning in and listening to me for as long as you did. I know I kind of gave an earful this time, but again, remember the importance of thankfulness, okay? So I love everyone. I thank everyone for watching my videos, for following my channel, staying tuned, but that's all for this one. I'll see you next time. Love you all and God bless.